Heavenly Father, today we put on the full armor to protect us against attack. We put on the belt of truth to protect against lies and deception. We put on the breastplate of righteousness to protect our hearts from the temptations. We put the gospel of peace on our feet to walk in your light, peace, and freedom with the Holy Spirit. We rebuke anxious thoughts. We take up your shield of faith for protection to block and destroy all the darts and threats thrown at us by the enemy. We put on the helmet of salvation to cover our minds and thoughts, reminding us that we are children of a mighty King. We are forgiven, set free, saved by the blood of Jesus. We take up the sword of the Spirit, your living word, that has the power to demolish strongholds and is sharper than any double-edged sword. We come to you, Lord, in prayer daily. In Jesus' mighty name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you,
What's up,
God.
you guys? Welcome to The Imagination. I'm your host, Emma, and today I'm honored to have back on the show for a second time satanic and Masonic ritual abuse, MK Ultra and child trafficking survivor, overcomer, and whistleblower, qualified survival instructor, instructor for hostile environment awareness training, former alpine climber, Tibetan medicine practitioner, adventure sport instructor, an outdoor lover, my new friend, an all-around badass and inspiration, Lou. A little recap on Lou's life and story. If you missed her first testimony, she courageously shared on her first episode. Born on August 8th, or 8/8, a date symbolically significant in the esoteric circles that shaped her early life, Lou emerged into a world steeped in spiritual and occult influences. Her family's bloodline, tracing back to early British royalty, Danish ancestry, and historical figures like Odin and Freya, marked her as a target for exploitation by secret societies, including Masonic and military networks. Unbeknownst to her as a child, this lineage, combined with her innate psychic abilities, would thrust her into a world of ritualistic abuse and mind control programming. Lou's earliest years were shrouded in dissociation, a coping mechanism that veiled her memories until age 9. It was during a live TV appearance on a British radio show, Kilroy, that she first realized she had no recollection of her childhood, a stark revelation that her mind had locked away years of trauma. Raised in South London, Lou's home was a paradox of spiritual lore and dark undercurrents. Her mother, a spiritual channeler, practiced yoga, healing, and automatic writing, influenced by esoteric figures like Stephen Jenkins, a Mongolian Buddhist, an author, and Andrew Barty, a Grandmaster of the Knights of Malta, who was a frequent visitor to her home and one of her abusers, presenting himself as charitable while orchestrating ritualistic abuse of children behind the scenes. Lou's father, who was a former merchant navy, worked at Shirley Oaks Children's Home as a maintenance worker and builder, and was a former model with celebrity friends like David Prowse, who played Darth Vader in Star Wars. This only added to the complicated family dynamics of Lou's family. At age 30, the veil of dissociation began to lift. The death of her father and Andrew Barty in 2008 coincided with Lou's realization of her dissociative identity disorder. She began piecing together her fragmented past, triggered by photographs revealing bruises she had overlooked for decades and memories of cover stories that didn't align. Going public with her story has been Lou's act of defiance against the Masonic and military networks that sought to silence her. By sharing her experiences on platforms like this podcast, she aims to expose the hidden abuse within secret societies, validate other survivors' experiences, and call for justice. Lou's courage in confronting these truths, despite the fear of retaliation from powerful circles, makes her a powerful beacon of hope. Today, Lou continues to heal, supported by her faith and a community of survivors. Her story is a call to action to recognize the pervasive influence of mind control and ritual abuse in society, from the symbols in our architecture to the programming embedded in media. She urges those within these networks to find the courage to speak out and seek redemption, emphasizing that healing is possible for all. Lou's journey, from a child ensnared in a web of deception to a warrior reclaiming her voice, stands as a powerful testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the transformative power of truth. Her message is very clear. By sharing our stories, we can dismantle the lies, heal our inner children, and build a world where no one carries the shame of abuse alone. Before wrapping up the introduction of today's guest, I'd like to share just a couple quick reminders and updates. If you're interested in being a guest on the show, if you wanted to share any information privately with me, or if you were interested in submitting a written testimony for my upcoming book series or to be featured on a Substack article, you can reach out to me via email at imagineabetterworld2020@gmail.com or standbysurvivors@protonmail.com. Additionally, I've teamed up with a couple of my favorite brands to offer you exclusive discount codes on products I love, such as Rife Technology frequency machines and CZTL's premium methylene blue. You can find all the relevant links and codes along with other resources down below in the show notes. Your support across all platforms is greatly appreciated, especially as I've had to shift to alternative streaming platforms such as Rumble and X following the extreme censorship that caused my last channel to be terminated off of YouTube. I've just recently started a new YouTube channel, and you can subscribe to me there at the handle at Imagination Podcast Official that I am now rebuilding and streaming new episode premieres from weekly. This transition to multiple platforms is crucial to continue sharing vital information with the public and disclosure communities. So thank you on the other side of the screen wholeheartedly for helping to make the imagination the safest space on the internet for survivor, whistleblower, advocate, and educator disclosures. Your support means the absolute world to me and to every guest on the show. So you guys, without further ado, please help me in welcoming today's guest of honor, voice for the voiceless, fierce anti-child abuse and survivor advocate, overcomer and thriver, walking miracle, and absolute hero and warrior, the one, the only, Lou. Lou, thank you so much for being here with us today. It's so good to have you back and to see you again.
Well, yeah, no, thank you so much for that introduction. It seems huge. Yes.
You're so welcome. You're worth every word and then some. We were talking before we started recording just about what a miracle it is that people, so many now, are getting out of these systems that do so much to bind them within it. You know, your testimony shared ways that they do that on so many different levels, spiritually, physically, emotionally, sexually. There's so many different layers to this, you know, and trying to uncover that and contend with that is something that you broke down really beautifully on the last episode, helping us to sort of understand a bigger picture and how these networks are formed, the different factions involved, how secret societies tie in, the different programming that can be, you know, really divisive and can really tear somebody's life apart, especially if they're unaware of it, you know, as you were for so long before you woke up and so many others. So I'm really grateful to have you back to sort of dive deeper in your story. And then I know that we have this episode and then at least one more to fit in talking about more healing things and, you know, to sort of dive into that part of your story more. But first of all, again, thank you for being here. And I know that the last episode, which I'm going to have linked in the show notes below for people to go catch up on, there were some things that we didn't get time to talk about and we were going to save for another part. So I wanted to give you the opportunity to start with that and we can sort of fill in some of the gaps in your story and dive a little bit deeper into some of the things that you had prepared for today.
Thanks, Emma. I just wanted, sorry, I just had a come up. I think I tried to get so much out in the last episode. I wanted to get a real map out. I think there's such an urgency when you start speaking out as a survivor to get all the details out because you're worried about the consequences and what's going to happen. And there's a lot of whistleblowers speaking out on a multitude of things, whether they've had SRA or been involved in societies or not. There's a lot of consequences going around with the censorship and people have had their money frozen. I've had bank account frozen, things like this. So it is a brave and heroic thing to speak out. I don't feel like that. I feel like I feel like there's just a lot of things trying to come out all at once because it builds up over the years, and I think that's a side effect of having so many different parts as well. So if I go back to when I first realised I was dissociated, I think it will shed a bit of light on it for other people. Because yes, when I was 9, I realised I didn't have memory, but that was it. I didn't think anything more about it. And later on, when I was 30, I realised I had loads of time gaps. I was dealing with PTSD and I didn't really know what it was all about. And then I tried really hard to remember why I was losing time and what was going on. And I was with my mum in France one day, and I was helping carry some firewood in to the house for her. And she said something like, well, she said something, and then I forgot what I was doing, and I realized that I'd forgotten. I was in the next room, and I was like, oh, I've forgotten what was happening. Oh, Mum said something to me, and it was the first time I'd ever remembered after forgetting after switching, which I didn't realize was what had happened. I'd switched, and she'd said nobody would ever employ you like this, which is not that bad of a thing to say, but it's pretty horrible, isn't it? And I realized that I was actually helping her, so I was doing something helpful, so I didn't deserve it. And for the first time, I went back and said I didn't deserve that, and she looked shocked because I had never responded to anything like that before. And I saw part of her that had enjoyed saying things like that, which she shouldn't have. Obviously, and my mum has these split parts as well, so I saw that very clearly, and I wasn't there for much longer, put it that way. I left not long after. But for me, it was the realization that I had switched and I'd lost time. And I said, what's going on? And found out about dissociation shortly after that, that these part of dissociative thing. And not long afterwards, I returned to the UK, and I sought help in that regard. And I went through the sort of medical system. I'd had a bit of burnout. I went through the normal psychiatric clinic stuff, and they couldn't offer a proper diagnosis. They could only offer another diagnosis that allowed access to treatment that might help, but it was incorrect. So there was a kind of like absence of anything to help people with exactly this dissociative identity. And I said, I don't want that. If other people come along with this, they need the right treatment. And I forced them to get me the right treatment and diagnosis and whatnot. So I ended up going through to one of the only, there's two clinics that study dissociation in the UK. One is in London, I can't remember the name off the top of my head, and one's called the Pottergate Centre in Norwich, I believe. And I went through the Pottergate Centre, and they had training for a counsellor, and I was given 5 years counselling, which is unheard of in the country, and had a proper diagnosis for DID at that clinic a few years back now. And I'd hoped that other people would get access to this, but I've been the only one in the county that I was in to get access to treatment for DID. There's other people in the country that have had it, but in this county, it was just me. So it didn't really pan out quite like I thought. And I also thought I would have significant help in terms of deprogramming, and it hasn't in that regard been quite like that. Maybe there's been some others involved, I don't know, but so I looked to other survivors for help. I looked at other reading material for help, but I couldn't rely 100% on it, and I didn't want to taint my own part's testimony, which was really important, because you come to this awareness with a whole bag full of stuff, and you might still be being handled. You might have people still guiding your life in the direction they want it to go, where they might want you to be and what they might want you to do. And in a way, because I had thought a lot of this stuff in different ways over the years, even as a child, I would run away from the boarding school. I'd not check out. We used to have to check out these cards to show we'd left the building. I never did it. I just ran off. So I've always thought in a way what was going on. And later on in my 20s, I used to do the same thing. I'd just walk out of the town. I didn't necessarily have money or anything. I would just go on faith. And I think that was desperate attempts to get away from what was going on that I didn't know was going on in my front part. So as I had more awareness over some years, that originally I had a couple of parts, and you had a child part because people had said, "Oh, why are you speaking like that?" And I progressed, and I had different adult parts. I met other people in the street that would call me different names, so quite consistently as another part with a different name. And occasionally I would meet people that knew me and be like, "Hi, Lou, how are you?" And I think, "Who is this person?" And I didn't know who they were at all. And it turns out they were like my ex-boss, and I'd known them. I've worked with them several months and not that long before, and had no clue who they were because I'd switched into a different part. Um, so you have this bag of stuff. You're trying to figure out why you're switching, and then over time you become aware of the switches. Well, I did. I became more aware of the switches. Oh, I've just switched, gone little, or I've changed. What happened? But and that awareness might not always come for a few weeks. So I had people tell me, "You switched 3 weeks ago, it's been," and now I'm aware, like 3 weeks later, I was like, "I've switched, haven't I?" And they were like, "Yeah, 3 weeks ago," before I was aware of it. And now I have that awareness pretty instantly, like within seconds. But I still switch between a young 5-year-old part, we've dubbed five because she's that kind of age. And you can see it quite clearly in my face when I do switch to that part. And she was the front part when I was young. And then, so me and her kind of switched quite regularly as I was the adult front part. So we were like the clueless ones. So she has quite a big clue about the system and other parts and what's going on. And she holds quite a bit of knowledge, but in some ways is more relaxed because she hasn't got the 30, 40 years later. She's got that period of time and bits when she came out later, but not, she's a bit more relaxed than I am. So. And then the other time I realised was when I got to the school. Like I said, I was on that Kilroy show, realising I didn't have memory. But the other thing I didn't have by the age of 9 was empathy. I had I had no idea. I had no sense of self and no idea what I should feel when, or how I should respond or react to people. I didn't have anger, sadness, anything, no sense of self. And the reason I realized this was because I wanted a hug at this boarding school I was at. And my friend always used to get hugs. And I was like, "How's she getting these hugs?" "Oh, she's smiling." So I would practice smiling because I didn't know how to do it. And realized that I hadn't got these innate feelings by the time I was 8, 9. But when I was a year old, I did have that. I had huge empathy. I remember, in a couple of instances, my brother was at home and we had foster siblings that I later forgot about and remembered. And these foster siblings, the oldest was 6 and the youngest was 4. But my brother was 6 or 7 and she was 6, and she was very disturbed child as well. I had quite a horrific story. Her name was Joni, and her brother was called Johnny. So Joni was smashing my brother's head in a door frame. And I was in like diapers. I was like a year old because my brother's 6 years older than me. So I was like wanting to stop it from happening. And I think I screamed or something to try and alert people that this was going on. So I remember having empathy then and being worried. And then in nursery school, I would shepherd other little children around who were struggling or bullied or whatever like that. So I had huge compassion at that young age. But by the time I was 9, my experiences had really taken that away and made me quite steely. In fact, in counselling, we dubbed that part steely because they would have done anything because they didn't have any feeling. But I wasn't really conscious of all this till a lot later when I was trying to piece everything together when I read, my 30s. And over my teens and 20s, I tried to heal from physical problems I had, like asthma and eczema and depression. And everything I did was a kind of response to those kind of physical problems. And later I had chronic fatigue, which is, I think, a real a bit of a symptom related to people who've been through this stuff, because your nervous system gets shot after a while. So it was very much like shell shock, and you just run out of reserves completely. And interestingly, it's called Guillain-Barré, isn't it? Some of these things are like really related to people's, an Epstein-Barr, related to the stuff that's going on. But I would seek out solutions. So in my 20s, I was seeking out all these physical solutions, and then later on, it turned out to be emotional. So I sought out help with various people, including Darlene we met, who is superb. She has a website called Emerging from Broken, and she helped me piece together a lot of the lies that had been in my life, and just get the emotional intelligence and vocabulary to navigate, because you often don't have that. You have all these different parts that take over and deal with different conditions like high stress or illness or abuse or whatever's coming up in your day-to-day life or business, whatever it is. Different parts have those traits that are equipped to deal with that, and it's not just that a programmer can call out a part. They come as they're needed. If you're in a survival situation, a part will arrive who's quite good at dealing with that. Because that's the natural tendency of dissociation, is to have parts deal with different situations that are going on. And then I started to sort of map my life out, because you have lots and lots of question marks. You have body memories. In fact, that's one of the first things I noticed was triggers, was via body memories. So I'd be getting reactions, but not knowing why or the context or where they came from. And when I was a teenager, I used to read a lot of books about people that had survived stuff, and I couldn't understand why I had such a comprehension of what people who had been tortured had gone through, because I was like, in my head at that age, I didn't know what had happened when I was younger. You have no consciousness. And I think few people realize that that's the whole point of programming, is to get these parts who don't know. They're the perfect spies, they're the perfect secret holders, because they don't know anything about the other parts. And if they do, if there's like an operation that they have to do or some job, and it's something that they want kept even more secret, then they'll do everything to mess your memory up. So after certain things I did in my 20s, I had people spike me, give me drinks, give me drugs that were massive overdose, like LSD. So I had a ex-boyfriend who handed me a broken bottle of LSD, and it went all over my arm. And by the time I got to where I was going, I was completely out of it. And I was like, does this stuff go through your skin? Because I didn't know. But I mean, it's actually a real technique for messing with your memory. So, and it's interesting, the times that those things happened after I'd done certain journeys, traveled to certain countries, and done certain things I wasn't fully aware of at the time. So you basically inherit all these question marks as a front part, and then when you have a part show up and do something that you don't know about, you begin to realize the massiveness of what's happened. So even after I'd done a couple of years counselling, I had a part turn up, and it was a nighttime part. So this is that theta brainwave I spoke a little bit about in the last thing. And they recited some words and called in a spirit. And I was so shocked, because I had awareness just on waking about what happened. But I wasn't that part. I didn't even know that part existed. And they called in a spirit. And so a spirit came in and I felt it. And that was kind of what woke me up simultaneously, was this huge experience, which I then had to solve, because I was like, why have I got a spirit in me? What's going on? How does this relate to everything else? But bearing in mind, a lot of my childhood was in terms of spiritual training and remote viewing and meditating, and my mum's history was hugely involved in that magical side of things. And the lens through which I saw it and my front parts was all love, light, peace, and goodness. But I had huge illness that my mum said, "Oh, I can't help you with that," and she was a healer. And there was no Christian edification or teaching from the Christians that were in my life, or the so-called Christians, so the grandmasters, Catholic and higher up, supposed to, help you with things like this and maybe not open loads of doors to speaking with the dead and etc. But obviously none of that. There's a different agenda involved. And then you learn how these bloodlines are relevant. And I thought I hadn't got any bloodline stuff because my family were pretty poor from London, and I looked at my genealogy, and sure enough, it went all the way back through this royal bloodline and to people that I thought were mythological heroes, which was Odin and Freya, which really shocked me. And that was through the McCullough family name, so McCullough, McCullough family line goes all the way back. My grandfather was part of that bloodline. And then what I've more recently thought was that there's an ideological targeting. We know about heterochromia, the Nazis targeted children, which I've got heterochromia. I've got quite golden line around my pupil. So these bloodlines, I'm not sure if they weren't not just the ancient sort of Canaanite bloodlines or bloodlines going back to Nimrod, because Odin is supposed to be Nimrod. It's a play on words. If you split the letters up, they're all relevant in Odin and Nimrod, which is very much a Masonic thing. So I think there's also the tribes of Israel. Obviously, there's a biblical war that this pertains to, and the lost tribes of Israel are very much pointed out as a target. And I'm not talking about Israel geographically. I'm talking about the exiled lost tribes who disappeared, and nobody knows where they went. But if you look at the root words of the word Hebrews, it means the wanderers, and it means the wanderers, and the Hebrews were exiled. So with this much we know. And some of them came to the UK to work in tin mines as slaves, right? So we know that happened. And the Canaanites, the name means merchants or traffickers. So this old word in the original Hebrew meant that. So if you look at this ancient history and you realise that the Hebrews came to the UK, and the root of the word Hebrew is also Aber, A-B-E-R, or Eber, or Ever, or like Ivor in Welsh. So Aber like Aberdeen or Aberystwyth, Eber like Ebergorge, which is a place in the southwest of Britain, and Ivor. And there's a lot of places in Wales with this Ivor or Aber, but they say it just means a wandering river, or like estuary, or mouth of an estuary. But actually they've taken some places that are called Aber, like castles, and changed their names. So they're not called that anymore. Abercorran is a castle now called Lafarn Castle in South Wales. So you take this kind of hidden history, and a lot of all the crests of those ancient tribes were on castles and were scrubbed out, so you can't see them anymore. And there's a tribe called Manasa that was made to forget. And I don't know all the details 100% accurately, but I know enough to recognize there's a reason why they target children, and it might not just be that your bloodline is part of those families, but your bloodline might also be part of the people set to inherit, which is those related to Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, in some of these lost tribes that were essentially the Celts. So the Celts that went off into Britain, into Australia, America, that whole Exodus had all these people and these bloodlines mixed in with it, whether they were doing the old religion or whether they were following God at the time. I mean, it's kind of relevant, and it is relevant because the people involved in doing a lot of this stuff are opposing it in all their rituals and fulfilling Babylonian magic. And uh, my reasoning for understanding that or recognizing it is not just from looking at like symbols or research online, but because the spirits involved that I called in were Babylonian. And I was like, why did this part call in the spirit that's Babylon? I had no idea about that stuff at all, but that's what they do. Um, which sounds really way out, but um, it's not so way out when it happens to you and you can feel it going on. And and um, I'm pretty sure I'm not supposed to be talking about any of that. Like that is part of all of the royal pictures and historic documentation showing spirits allied with ancient kings and those kind of bloodlines um, going back for years. So there's a kind of explanation in there. But if they make a child learn a verse to recite without them knowing, not by choice, there's something really dark going on there as well. And that's not the only thing that was going on as a child. So, and as an adult, I was made to go places and do things that I didn't understand why. So, what awareness I did have, I remember thinking, like, I went to Canada when I was 18, and I thought, why am I going to Canada? I wanted to go to South America. I always wanted to go to Peru or Chile first. Like, that's where I wanted to travel. And there I was in Canada, and I'd had a message on a loop in my mind saying, you must be in Canada by the end of the month. Like, and those kind of loop repetitive things, they're not your spontaneous thought. That is a type of programming. Anything you see repeated in the news or anywhere, there's a type of programming. So, I was working in the UK is doing hostile environment training, doing survival, learning things like this. This is when I came back when I was 30. And before that, I'd done all sorts of adventure stuff. And I was holding in one hand these working with people like special forces and doing first aid on triage level and extreme stuff ways. And on the other side of it, I was realizing I was dissociating and I was starting to look around the people around me and realizing that a lot of events that had happened in my past weren't so spontaneous and natural, but had actually been engineered to make me go somewhere, like go to London or go to Germany or go here or go there. And I didn't have the sense of self or volition or preferences to really choose what I wanted to do. I didn't know what I wanted. And I find it really interesting that there's a few of the survivors, like Nathan Reynolds, who's quite a similar story. He loves doing things like finding rocks. And I love finding rocks, like looking at old rocks. And I was like, isn't it weird that we both have this weird history and we both love rocks, like, and that's what we love to do. But of course, that's like a safe thing to like for someone who's controlling someone. They're like, yes, you can love rocks, you can pick up rocks whenever you like and look at the ground and not look round and not have awareness further than this preference that's safe for them. Like if I preferred to do, I don't know, paragliding or something and gone off training to do that, if they didn't want me doing that, that's annoying. But loving rocks is fine. Anyway, that's a bit of a tangent, but essentially, my life for myself, trying to choose what I want to do in my life through from my childhood right the way through. At first, it was survival. Like I got so sick when I was 8, I was nearly dead at that point. And then, it was trying to get better from illness. with my skin that had got so severe, but it was very much a reaction to what was going on, like a horrified reaction, and that was a form of self-harm. So although I had eczema, I had worried it to make it worse, and it was a real reflection of a total psychological and physical imbalance that was going on. That was huge and quite horrific. And I don't know if you want to put that photograph up of me when I was ill, just to illustrate that. So if you look at that photograph and then you look at another photograph of me when I was 4, when I didn't have that. So that was when I was 4. I wasn't in this photograph. But actually, if you look at that photograph, I've got bruised eyes and bruised shoulders. And I didn't even see those bruises until very recently when a friend pointed them out to me. And I was looking at the picture to try and connect with that part, who now I have like a 5-year-old part that's around all the time, nearly all the time. If I'm not about, that part is triggered out often. And I had never seen those bruises. I had those photographs for years and years, and it was as if they weren't there. They almost hypnotically, you couldn't see them. But I looked pretty healthy in that old photograph, but this one was just 5 years or 4 years later, and I have had this horrific experience. I've not slept. I've had 3 hours sleep at night, if that, and I had this kind of descent into this. Somebody called it in a newspaper article that I looked like a golem, or oh well, a golem is probably quite apt and magically probably relevant, but anyway, I'd got that much worse. So then I spent years healing from that experience, and it was the eczema that made me go to this special school called Pilgrims for kids with asthma and eczema, but actually it was for kids with genetic illnesses. And then I only noticed that it was all hereditary illness there, and it wasn't just eczema and asthma, because there were people with sickle cell and a lot of stuff that's relevant to what's been going on in the last few years. And they were doing medical research on kids there and paying them 50p a session to go and do medical research on 12-year-olds. Like one friend of ours was asthmatic, and he was put in an air chamber to run on a machine. And they stopped the air on the machine as he was running, so he couldn't breathe. And he was 12, and that's the sort of stuff that they were doing. And they had parent permission to do this research because it would save other children. I didn't find that out until some years later, speaking to kids from my school. So, and then other kids from my school went to the hospital. I don't know if I've sent. So as I was trying to figure everything out, I found a mural. A friend of mine said, "Have you seen this mural?" And that's what I covered in the first episode. The fact that there was a horned head on the mural, and there was a horned head on this hospital. But one of my other school friends had also gone to this hospital. And I was like, why would you have Dionysus, like horned god, on the side of a children's hospital that was built to be a children's hospital, right? So it's got demonic heads on it. And then in the mural, 100 years later, in the same town, there's this horned head and a lot of Masonic symbols. It's actually in my pin post on Twitter. And that mural had a coded tile in the middle that would change. Somebody would scrub it out and write over it regularly every few months or something. And it was coded because it was written in Greek mirror lettering. And I figured it out. I was like, I'm not that big a Sherlock Holmes or anything. I didn't have parts that knew it, but I'm not that daft. So I figured it out. And it was actually an address for a people referral centre in Brighton for kids with problems that used to be a hotel and had a big basement underneath it. But the hospital that I went into also had like 6 stories underneath it and linked up quite a lot of the town. So these 6 stories, I mean, the blueprints for them used to be online a while back. And a friend of mine that went to the same hospital, she was also with the Crown prosecution and she, I won't mention her name or too much personal stuff, but they had to carry evidence through these tunnels, and she'd seen evidence taken, lost evidence by people, and she I probably shouldn't say much more, but anyway, basically there's people that know that they lose evidence about cases in the Crown Prosecution Service and police and so on. So she went to the same hospital and had some weird stuff, like they all got put out of their ward onto a balcony on Halloween, like the night of Halloween, which is the end of October. So why would you put a bunch of kids out on a balcony? And she said, and she saw like weird monsters and stuff. And the only child that wasn't put out there was one that had facial disfigurement. So that's kind of, because they looked not very nice, was left in the ward. So they wanted the more attractive kids outside, just absurdly. Anyway, so she went to the same hospital as I did, and I can't recall too much about that time. But this all happened before I was 9 and in that state that you can see I ended up in. So they didn't help. They weren't helpful in that hospital. What my parts had done, and the only way I could do that was with my experience as a front part, what I could remember, and what my little part could remember. And for example, I mentioned earlier I had foster siblings, and but I had completely forgotten them as adult front part, and even my little part didn't remember anything. So I found photographs and I was like, who are these kids? And that was Johnny and Joni that had been fostered with us. And I had completely forgotten about them. I lived with them for years. They were like my brother and sister for the formative years of my life. And they ended up going to a Christian kind of foster care home. And I don't know. I've had no news about them since. I don't know what happened to them. How it's such a shock when you find you've got a part that you didn't know, that's not you, it's not your choice to have this part come and do stuff, and then they're coming and doing stuff they've been taught to do and convinced to do. Like in some ways they sell it to you, so however they can get someone to do something, whether they pay them or reward them, or you have this big fluffy idea about it being this great thing, or you're chosen, or you're special. So whatever they need to tell parts to do stuff is what they tell parts to do stuff. So the reason it was a shock for me was I'd already been counselling, and I'd read everything I could that would help me undo the programming and deal with dissociation. And then there's this other part who's like, I've defeated everything that you've tried to do, and I'm still here, and I'm going to come up at my appointed time and do what I'm told to do, or I was told to do, like in the past, So it strikes me that a lot of this stuff happens, and they have a calendar that is old, and they have people that are primed for on this day. For me, it was May 13th or 14th, which was the original old Halloween date in like the 11th century or something. So it didn't used to be October the 31st, it used to be in May. So that same day was when I was triggered to come out. And yeah, so it was a bit of a shock. And before that, the parts that I had come up, other people sort of noticed a bit more. So like people I was close to could see more clearly than even I could that I had switched or changed or something. So then you start looking back through your life a bit with it, without the tinted glasses. Like the tinted glasses I had in the past were, oh, isn't it everything so coincidental, or synchronicity of amazing things happened, and you just bumped into this person here, and it was just all spiritual, wonderful, fluffy stuff, right? And now I'm like, that makes you so vulnerable. You're so vulnerable to being misled in that, and or hypnotized even. So everything, all these wonderful things that I'd had where I bumped into these people, I started to look at a bit more closely, and I started to ask questions. Why was I going here? Like, I went to Germany, um, and I was planning to go to university, and it was this plan out of nowhere. Never really wanted to go to university in Germany, so suddenly I was wanting to go there and go and study. And off I go on this journey to Germany, and this was in my 20s. And I'm staying in a flat. I don't know why I'm there. I don't know whose flat it is. And every day I'd go to the same bakery and ask for the same cake. That's like something out of a spy novel, this kind of stuff. And I went into a university there, and I didn't learn about anything to do with becoming a student or something that you would expect or go around. I don't remember anything after going in through the front doors and into the lobby about going to visit this university at all. And that's a really big clue. If you have a big major gap in your memory for something that you would think you would have more on, that's pointing at something else going on. And on that trip, actually, I was with a friend, and we had tickets to come back to the UK on a coach. So you'd think you'd go on the coach, wouldn't you? But no, we were going to hitchhike. And my friend was like, let's hitchhike. And this was when the Bosnian refugees were in the ports. So it was the late 90s. And they were all the lorry drivers been told, don't pick anybody up, no refugees, you get fined £5,000 if you pick up a refugee, which is horrible because um, they were desperate people. So we hitchhiked through from Germany, through the border, Venlo, through Holland, Belgium, France, into France. And on this journey, we got out of one car and another car was waiting for us, which always happens when you're hitchhiking, doesn't it? You get out of one car and there's another car there. And it got to the middle of the night, and we were in Ostend in a car park at 3 o'clock in the morning in a storm, flapping a bit because, like, what do we do? Where do we go? And this Canadian guy just happens to be there and was like, girls, go and get on this tram. So off we ran and got on the tram. And I used to tell this story as like how wow it was, right? Wow, that this happened and this happened and this happened. And we got on the tram, went through from Ostend into France. We there was a load of Girl Guide scouts on it in the middle of the night, like, or however time it was by then, weirdly. And then we were off at the end of the line in France, and it was still dark, and there was nowhere, nothing. There was like a house and a roundabout, and I was like, nobody around. And then a guy comes who's like a gangster, smoking a bit of reefer, music, and I was like, is this the best car to get into? And he was like gesturing, he didn't say anything, just gestured, like getting girls. In we get, and my friend's multilingual, so she's speaking all these languages to all these people, like as we drive, we go through these places. And he drives us right into the port, like all the way in, doesn't say anything, leaves us there, goes. And then we're walking past thousands of refugees, all trying to get on the boats to come over. And a lorry driver sees me and my friend and goes, you don't look like refugees. Come on, get in the cab. Come with me. This random lorry driver who then drives onto the boat. And then we get off the other side, we just walk off, and we haven't had to do passport or anything because you just get waved on. And for a long time, I was like, wow, that journey was so fun, and we did this and we did that, and how great. And then when I realized I had dissociative parts, I looked back at that trip and went, what on earth was I doing actually there on that trip? There was other things going on, there was other people involved. And sure enough, when we got back, my friend disappeared really quick. Like 1 minute she was there and then she's like, I've got to go right now. And she obviously had more that she had to do. So, and that's not the only story. I have multiple stories like that, like, of there's gaps, there's other things going on, there's other people involved, and what the hell am I doing here? It's normally my puzzled self going, why am I here talking to these people? Um, yeah. So you just you don't always have like a lot of survivors. I'm quite envious of that in the sense of they can remember some things, and I've actually come from the I bloody can't remember, and I know stuff's happened because my body has scars on it, and I have like huge reactions, like um, if I was sleeping at night with someone, my whole body would jump in the bed, like jump off the sheets. You know, when you get like a twitch, some people get or jump slightly, but like enough that my whole body would move off the bed because of this kind of nervous stuff inside me. And then I have scars like on my body, sort of symmetrically aligned, going from my wrists and my ankles and my calves. And they are, I remember seeing them when I was a kid and thinking, why have I got these? They were like penny-sized sores on me. But now I know that was related to electric shock stuff. So they had obviously been using that as part of the programming, and it makes sense why I would have these huge jumps in my these huge nervous kind of like freaky jumps happen. Um, so and then I also have surgical scars, and for someone that is supposed to have never had surgery, that was I think I mentioned that in the first program. I'm not sure, but the Grand Master was an honorary surgeon. And obviously, I can't remember anything about that, but I do have a surgical scar. So on my back, it's about midway up my back, and it's kind of vertical, and I'm on my spine. Um, you kind of have a lot of not knowing alongside a lot of symptoms, and then you also have a lot of results. So as a kid, I remember having results of abuse, but not remembering what happened that night. So there was obviously something going on because I was dealing with it. And the next morning, I was having to deal with blood and stuff, but didn't have the context. I didn't have that part was totally removed. And then how are you supposed to tell someone something's going on when you have these completely separate parts? And and you're dealing with exhaustion. I think so many victims are knackered, they're so tired, big bags under their eyes because they're tired and everything else. And you're kind of, I have parts that were trained in certain things with extreme focus, whether it was the remote viewing stuff or um certain other things I didn't know I knew till later, um like I had I have military Morse code going on at speed at times, and I know other survivors have heard this, and that's not like in the room. Like if you were in the room with me, you wouldn't hear it, but I can hear it, and other survivors have had that. So I don't know how they do that, but they can communicate with certain people with Morse code. But only the parts that had the training to understand that can understand it. But I did a little bit of Morse code at school and can decipher some bits of it. And I've had it about 3 times in the last year that I'm aware of that have. So I don't know if they're triggering other survivors in that way, but like that. So I was like, great, one of my parts knows this Morse code this fast, like military level Morse code. Why? Don't know. Don't really know why. Because
What types of messages would you hear? Like what would the Morse code be? Do you remember any of it?
and there was very short and repeated. One went on for like into the next day on and off. And I've only managed to translate a couple, but one of them was like in the morning, up, like get up, get up now, like something you need to do. And my counselor was like, that's a part's been trained to do that or say that or repeat these tones, which was something that happened in the past. Was I'd get like just a single tone, like every day at 5 o'clock or 10 o'clock, like just once. And I didn't know whether that was something that would switch right brain, left brain, or put you in a kind of state. But yeah, the Morse code was in the last year or two. And that's why I reached out to some survivors, because I was like, I really don't want to be the only one hearing this stuff. I'm going to find out if anybody else has. Not that that's a good thing, but there were a few people that had had the same thing. So lucky us. But I mean, it illustrates the text side of it, doesn't it? It illustrates that um, involvement and how far ahead they are. And um, I actually had some friends that were ex-military special forces, and um, in that situation, had invited me, and I opened up about a lot of my stuff, and I probably shouldn't have. Like, with hindsight, people that are ex-military or something hanging around and buttering you up should probably like be a bit more wary. But I think naivety is programmed in to trust people. But anyway, they took a photograph, but it wasn't a normal photograph, and the person I was with said that wasn't a normal photo, like with a really bright flash. And it was so bad that I had flickering in my eyes. Still get it now, like this flickering in one of my eyes from this bright flashing light, which is a bit Men in Black. But I felt like such an infringement, because they sort of didn't get my permission. They were like, "Can we take this photograph?" And took the photograph. And then I asked for copies of it, and I never got one. So I just ended up having this flickering light in my eye. And the other thing that relates to that is, as a small child, I had severe sinus pain, and I had like a hole. Like the dentist said, there's a hole behind, like they've drilled a hole up. And the reason I know there's more to that story is because I had three different stories as to why it happened from my mum. Not one story, but actually like, oh, you fell here. Oh, this happened. Oh, I didn't know that you had something until we went to some airport or something the next day. And your face, so either she knew, she didn't know, or you know what I mean? These kind of multitude of things that actually it says that's a lie. So I suspect she didn't know, or she had parts that did know. But yeah, so I had a hole going up my sinuses from that age, and don't know why, and now have flickering light from whatever they did.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing all this. This is really important in explaining sort of the backstory, because what most survivors and people have is that cover story of what their life was. And so contending with what happened behind the scenes might not
Yeah,
always come right away. Like you said, you might get some type of a somatic, you might get some really weird nightmare or a symptom. You might get a manifestation of, you know, triggers or things that just don't make sense without the context, like you said. And so being able to hear possibilities of why those things could happen can be really important, because if you're triggered in a moment, and it makes you somehow destabilized, if you're at work or if you're, with your significant other, it can be very confusing to you and to the other person, and could make the survivor feel like there's something wrong with them, like they're going
yeah,
crazy, or, that they don't know why it's happening. And it can be really
yeah,
confusing. So I think just having the ability to critical think here and to just have these conversations can hopefully be really helpful for survivors. We're in a moment where they don't have context. Instead of freaking out, they can say, okay, I know I'm being triggered. What could it
yeah,
possibly be? Instead of me reacting, let's separate
mm,
myself from that a little bit and think maybe it's a memory trying to surface, or maybe something reminded me of something from childhood and I just don't know it. It can be so
yeah,
helpful in those moments just to like be able to breathe for a second and to have the ability to say, okay, what's actually going on here, instead of just reacting to whatever it is that's happening.
yeah. And I mean, so some of the things that happen like that are like early program results. So you're dealing with the stuff that there's a little part that's told to do this, and they do it like years later. Or you're dealing with their traumatized selves, that they've had this trauma, and something's triggered them just from your natural day-to-day environment. And a lot of day-to-day things like just going in and out of doors, going to the bathroom, a lot of things that happen regularly, I think were also used as programming tools, because I switch when I go through a door or when I come back from the bathroom, and it's like related to stuff that's happened, or there's an advantage to having me switch to that part for those people. You're dealing with like a multitude of different feelings, and you're dealing with different parts. Like I will have parts that are like conversing, discussing in my head, but I always used to think that was just my one voice. But actually, it's not just my one inner voice. It's like a multitude of inner voices just debating about stuff. Um, and other people don't realize how overwhelming it is. Like, so you might have a partner or a friend, and they're like, "Why don't you listen?" Like, because I'm like already having this other thing going on. There's a massive internal world that's been manipulated, and they've used our subconscious against us. And I think a lot of the therapy, quote unquote, does everything to avoid us tapping into our subconscious and finding out what's in there, because that is like the vestibule of everything, and it's their way of controlling us. So one of the other sort of massive signs for me that I thought everybody had was I had that eye in the pyramid. So I used to call it the eye of Providence. I was taught that was the eye of Providence, but it's a Masonic symbol of an eye in a triangle, and some people call it the eye of Horus. Um, but I had that in my psyche. It was like imprinted on me like an internal tattoo that was kind of like this spiritual doorway that was huge. And I used to think it was a spiritual thing, so that was enough reasoning for me to have this. But I thought everybody had it, but everybody doesn't have that imprinted on their internal psyche. They don't all have it. And I didn't have an origin for it either to be there. In that context, that missing context, those missing pages from your life, it came from there. And then I didn't know about Masonic stuff. So there were Masons in my life, and my mum didn't even understand what that meant, that they were Masons. So and there's Masonic symbols everywhere in architecture and like history and everything. That's that hidden hand right there. And we are a kind of toolbox for the hidden hand. So the hidden hand has been going along, orchestrating society to reflect their black and white duality, mercy, severity, whatever. Claptrap, I'm afraid I'm quite irreverent, because the end result has been a lot of hurt people, hurt children, and wars and events and things that are all party to that planning. Um, So I was like, why have I got this eye inside of me? Why is it in these parts? Why do they draw things like this over and over? Why are your doodles always like spirals, like the hypnotic spiral? Why, when you watch the television, or just like pop shows, and it's just spinning it round upside down, because they're using that hypnotic symbolism, because they found it really effective on us, right? So everything being used on everybody else is as effective. It worked on them, so it's going to work on the wider population. And then I it took me a little while, because my my trauma part memories are still really segmented off, and they tend to come up really body memories more than anything else. And it's hard to narrow down like any details, like if you're doing a police report, where, when, how, who, what, whatever. You can't answer them questions, especially if it's very small when something happened. But I do get information from different parts about certain things, and I have been involved in my 20s, um, in some of quite major things that have happened in the world. Um, the July 7th bombing that happened in London.
Mm-hmm.
So for some few months before that, I was invited to come and get a job. Somebody had got me a job up there, and because I was struggling to find work and a place to live, so I had this job up there, right in the middle of London. And I would get one of the trains that were later involved in that bombing every day, up early at the time when everything happened. Get this train, and because I was homeless, I was carrying a rucksack every day through these train stations. And then on the day that it happened, I was on a different train because I was going to go and do a survival course that I'd been selected for to go off and do this survival course. And during the middle of the day, we found out the bombing and everything that had happened. And then I didn't think anything of it apart from I was shocked. So I was like, oh my God, that was a train. I would have been on that train because I've got it every day for the last few months. And today I haven't got it because I'm on this survival course. I survived and didn't go on that train. Crazy. Anyway, when I went to Canada in '97, which is one of the countries, I was like, why am I here? I didn't want to come to Canada, but there I went off to Canada. I went to Toronto, and I went and stayed on an like eco village place, and there were some volunteers there, and it was the winter of the ice storms, which was I think '97, in the big huge ice storms they had in Canada, and all the trees fell and telegraph poles and all of this. Um, and anyway, while I was at this farm, I've alone gaps for this period of time. We went to conferences like the Sierra Club because it was like eco and do all this stuff. And I at these conferences, I remember one of them. I was like, I must go find this guy and I must speak to this particular man who was a relative of Ken Saro-Wiwa. But while I was doing it, I was like, why? Like my front part was going, why have I got to go and speak to this guy? Why am I doing it? So there's another sort of telltale that you're doing something you don't really want to be doing and don't know why you're doing it. So off I went, and I think I promised him the earth. So he was the brother of the poet Ken Saro-Wiwa that was shot in Nigeria or killed, executed, because he was trying to stop the Shell Corporation from taking all their lands. You drill for oil or whatever they were doing out there. And his brother ended up in the Clinton Foundation, and his daughter ended up going to the poshest school in the UK. Didn't say that separately. And he was a doctor from Nigeria. But I mean, it doesn't point at anything. But anyway, I promised him the earth when I saw him, and I was like, I don't have the earth to promise this guy. I don't even know this guy. Why am I promising him the earth? But someone else wanted me to say that to him. I'm pretty sure now. It's like pass on the message. Go and find this man. Blah blah blah. Whatever. Anyway, the same period of time, the people that ran the eco village, one of them mentioned to me that they come up from the farm in Virginia, which is only like a CIA training facility, which I didn't know until later. Like, I didn't put two and two together. I just remember her saying that they'd come up from the farm, not a farm, the farm. And he was a ballistic missile engineer. So this guy that I went to stay with in Canada for some time was a missile engineer, but it was a farm. Like, we milked a cow together. I don't remember other stuff, but I remember milking a cow with him. So it's kind of weird that you bump into people like this. But the other thing about that was 4 years before 9/11 happened, which is the two towers, which is Masonic because it's two towers. And most people don't see that stuff. And I was like, I'm worrying about, did I have parts to do anything in relation to this stuff? And then I was like, well, I don't know unless I get some more information from parts that were involved. And they did give me information. So there was an exhibition in New York for 4 years before the towers came down. And if you go and look on their 9/11 memorial site, it talks about the World Exhibition and the artists that were involved. And you can go and look at some of their art, which is kind of crazy because it's like planes flying into someone and stabbing them. And kind of freaky art. And those artists, some of them died in the event. Like, so they gave the whole floor, one of the floors involved, to all these artists for an exhibition. And my part knew all about this. I didn't know about it, but my part did. So anyway, it might be that if you're recovering as a someone that's been used as a toolbox by these people, that you find out stuff about things that they've done. And that's kind of quite a massive thing to find out, that the artist had access to all of these floors, total free access for 4 years beforehand. You realise that so many events have survivors as part of them, or people call them crisis actors, or like, I mean, who shot Trump and all of that stuff. People that are clearly like MK, that recent Southport one in Britain. It's an MK kid. It's a kid that's been programmed to be that violent, because you would never naturally have that violence in you. You just don't. It's put there by others. It's called learned behavior. Um, so anyway, they like engineering all of this stuff for us, to engineer us so that they control us. And I don't know in what manner fully. I have an idea. I wouldn't want to talk about it too much. Um, but it's a bit like, over dinner with the grandmaster when I was a kid, they would talk about the Antichrist. Like, this is a Christian Catholic guy, and they talk about the Antichrist. And that was a big deal to them, like talking about the Antichrist coming, and someone said about brought it up, and he was like, "Oh, you will see him. You will see the Antichrist." And they kind of worship the Antichrist as like Voldemort, like hooded robed figure, a bit like the one in the Olympics. Um, and they try and get parts of kids to embody that whole system. So the satanic system, I wasn't introduced to it with like horns, scary beasties, but I did see um stuff people wouldn't believe. Um, and like my mum, has the spirit she channeled was the Lord of Time, which is Kronos, which is Saturn, effectively. Kind of, you can see where I'm going with that. But like all love, light, and peace. And it wasn't until later when I was asking a lot of questions, was like, my mum's really struggling now. Like she's lost the plot a bit and struggling. And I was really ill, and I was like, if someone was really love, light, and peace, that wouldn't have happened. My mum wouldn't be struggling, and I wouldn't have been ill like I was, and this abuse wouldn't have happened, and so on and so forth. So you kind of have to hold up the bad experiences and the good experiences, and next to what's really going on. So, like, all you're told happened and didn't happen. Like, I didn't find out anything about building a wooden spaceship with my dad, and it never happened. And I believed it for years and years and years. I built this wooden space, like a little one, like a model. Never happened. How many things they told you this has happened or that's happened, and you've just been to the park, and because the whole point of dissociation and the generational dissociation is that you're really moldable and hip and suggestible. Anybody can say anything and you'll believe it. So you kind of have to hold normal life, what you think should be normal, next to your life. And the lies that you've been told, like my mum saying nobody would ever employ you, was that true? I had to hold it up next to what it ought to be. And it's a typical abuser thing that they, they'll beat you down and try and reduce you, and that make you feel less than. And that's another really good clue, is is someone making you feel less than or more than them? Like, if they're making you feel less than, you've got to get away from them. That's a toxic person. And actually, some of my biggest healing happened when I was like, right, no more toxic people. I'm not going to hang out with anybody that makes me feel less than. And my mum had this kind of weird thing where she was half great mum and gave great pep talks, and half this kind of evil mum with the spirit, this kind of demonic spirit that other people I've known have met and encountered and not been able to handle for like a week because the spirit comes through. Um, so I mean, people are often around me like, why are you kind of talking about Christianity and God? And I haven't always been open about it because people have different levels they're coming from. But basically, they're all satanic and dark stuff and godlessness and atheism and I was like, oh, I can be enlightened, do Tibetan Buddhism and learn all this great magic stuff, right? So I was on that page, which it also sort of doesn't believe in God. It believes you can be like God. But I was like, actually, can any of these people like make a tree just appear or make anything around us just happen? Because until they can do that, they're not a God. And in any way, shape, or form, um, they can only mess with what's already here. So you have these events that are really normal and banal in your daily life, and these stories that you think your life is this, and then you have a different part come along and say, actually, I know more about this thing that I shouldn't know about. And you're like, what the hell? This big can of worms. Am I making sense? I feel like I'm going all over the place at once, but I'm trying to hold it together.
You're doing great.
I don't want people to be frightened off in the sense that you find out you've got a dissociative thing and you think you've been used to do everything terrible or whatever. Um, I don't think everybody has that story. Everybody has different stories about what they were used for. I think I think context is really important, and I was a bit of a useful and invisible person on some level. And obviously the Masonic orders are very relevant to the espionage stuff and the three-letter agencies and all of it tied together. So my toolbox use was in some way in those events, and some things that I was really ashamed about that I didn't really have full awareness of at the time or for years, but I have more recently. And then just before we came on the show, I was telling you about reading the Bible and how I just read about my people shall not be ashamed, and it's like in Joel 2 or something, 2 paragraphs. They shan't be ashamed, and I was like, because I have so much shame about all of this. Like shame is the underpinning of the whole web of everything. It's what makes these people do what they do. It's what makes abusers do what they do. Because underneath it all is this shame that's been kind of morphed into awful stuff, and it's what makes the world work how it is at the minute, with people lying or people sort of doing 180s and they promise something and they change their tune, is because they've got shame or fear about what's happening, or they're blackmailed or they're controlled because they got this control nailed down in the, what was it, the 70s. Kim Noble, that painter, she was the gold standard. So they've had the ability to make people not know for all of that time. So they would be in the 60s now, some people with that level.
One thing I wanted to ask you, because I think this is everything we're talking about is so important. But before a survivor can even get to this point where they get some of this context, a lot of times what happens when they start remembering is these self-harm programs automatically start firing off, whether it's to hurt yourself or worse. And I would love to know how you navigated that when it would happen to you and any tips that you can give on things that helped you or ways that you navigated those moments now that you've overcome them. To me, the most sad thing is that a survivor will go through all these things that could kill a person and they survive it and they have all the potential in the world to heal. And all of a sudden they're right there. They're so close to like being free and being on a path of healing. And these programs fire off and keep them from it. And it's just so devastating to think of how many lives we've lost. And as more people keep waking up, I think voices like yours, people who have overcome that and who are here, who can talk about this without those programs going off, it's going to serve to save lives. So I'd love to hear how you overcame that and anything you want to even educate people who might not know what these things are, just sort of, your experience with it in any way that we can educate on it.
So, um, when I was 8, in that photograph, I was 9 years old. I weighed 3.5 stone in that photograph, where I was really poorly with my skin looking. And not long before that, I had an incident where I tried to tear my own throat out to end it, right? So I'm an 8-year-old, and I've tried to like gouge my own throat out to end it. And my mum, I think, was there, and she hit me to like slap me back into reality, but not in a mean way, but actually to bring me back. And I think it shocked me that my mum had hit me, and I did. She'd stopped it from going further. But I was putting all my effort into trying to finish it as best I could, and that was the only way I knew how at the time. So, I mean, that's not normal. A child shouldn't want to end their life as an 8-year-old, right? It's really, really extreme. And I was in a really state of horror. So what had happened to me had horrified me to that degree. And the physical experience was kind of a symptom of that inner experience of horror rather than the other way around. It I remember trying to get it off me. So whatever had caused that trauma was that level, and then try to kill myself like that. Um, and luckily, that intervention came by other people. My mum got me into this special school, and that intervention was what saved me then. And then I started to rebuild myself, and I actually had a couple of years, I think, of a bit of a gap because I don't think they wanted me to go in this school. There was kind of an effort to stop me from going there. But because my IQ was like quite high, like it went off the scale of the test that they did at the time, that was the reason they said that I could go into this special school, not because I was like nearly dying with this bad problem, skin problem, but because I was clever. Um, After that, I got a bit better. I had a really great couple of years. I did swimming. I met other kids with similar stuff and all of that. But obviously, I'd blanked out my whole previous childhood, which is kind of helpful. Sometimes, brain injury or amnesia releases you for a little while. So I got a lot better. But then I had severe depression, huge depression, and I had flashbacks, and there was some involvement then by other people coming in at that time, and I didn't know what, where, or how. And in the same period of time, I had these sort of electric shock signs or whatever they'd done, burns were quite big. But I didn't really ever um, understand that at the time. So I had huge depression, and I dealt with that by becoming a survival instructor. I was like, I need to get fit. That's what it says. You have to do sports and exercise, really like from the outside in, trying to help myself at the time as I didn't know. And I went off and did a selection weekend from a survival instructor, and then did all abseiling and all this training. I got on the course, was really shocked because I was 17 and I got on this course and got this job. And it did help my depression. So within 3 months, I was able to laugh like normally for the first time. So in the sense of you as a survivor, having self-harm programming, there's all these different extremes, and there's every kind of way it can happen. And you solve things I think like I did from the outside of what helps this, what helps that, depression, I'll go and do exercise. Those things can help. So I learned early on to do good things alongside bad things. So even though I did the bad thing, I'd try and do one good thing with it in the hope that over time those good things would outweigh the bad things because I preferred them. They made me feel better, right? The other thing I told myself was I lied to myself. I was like, one day it could be better. It'll be better than this. And I shouldn't kill myself or shouldn't do anything because I'll miss that if I'm not there and it could be better than this. So I told myself that it's not time yet. And the other thing I thought to myself was I'm gonna die anyway, I'll die once. And I've gone through all this. I'll just wait until then. I'll just keep going, like hid myself that I can endure whatever. And so I had two things. I had one that one day it might get better. Two, I'm gonna die anyway, so I might as well kick about. There's always something like biscuits or some little thing that there's some little thing that you can enjoy or you can dissociate in a different way and enjoy stuff. So yeah, I kidded myself, I lied to myself, and then I had in program terms, I had a really severe self-hatred, so I hated myself. And when you don't have self-identity, and that is your self-identity, that's really hard to navigate through life. And you don't have like other people like I enjoy doing this. They enjoy doing something and they tell you what they enjoy doing and they go and do the thing that they enjoy and you don't know what you enjoy because you've had your sense of self overwritten by other people who have said what you will enjoy or won't enjoy. In fact, they don't want you to enjoy too much. And so I had this, I hate myself, and I had to change that self description by saying, um, I might not be that bad. I couldn't say I wasn't bad, but I could say I might not be that bad. And then I moved to, I might be all right, I might be good over the years. It took me a few years to change this thing. But even now, I have a little part that every day is like, am I bad? They'll pop up and they'll be like, am I bad? Have I done something wrong? Am I in trouble? Like a little kid who's stuck thinking in that. And it's kind of like a bit groundhog, which is a bit disheartening probably to hear that each part might need to do the same thing of change that I hate myself to I might be all right. But I think if you have any kind of worry about stuff or anguish or remorse about anything, you're already an all right person. Like how much we fret, and I know I'm not the only one, we are sensitive. Like survivors have their awareness so much further out than normal people. We know what's going on a mile away. And yes, dissociation can make you look like you don't, or like you're a bit scatty or floating, but you know absolutely what's going on. And because that's what you were trained to survive, you survived people of unimaginable evil intent to do harm, and yet they were subtle and they told nice stories and were funny, and so that to mask like, and the same with the devil, the horned god. Oh, marvel appear Satan appears as an angel of light and does. So how do you have discernment between these stories, these spiritual stories you've inherited? On the one hand, these great skills that you get, like telepathy, which is something I had, and occasionally have, um, and remote viewing, which is kind of a normal thing to me. It wasn't. I didn't realize it was a special skill because it was just habitual. You have to practice discerning. Like I say, you have to put normal next to what you think normal ought to be. Like we kind of have an idea of what true ought to be and what normal ought to be, and that you shouldn't feel self-hateful in a normal good world, in a normal just world. You wouldn't feel like that. And something much overlooked is our self-esteem. So they used shame, caused us to have experiences that made us feel ashamed. And I think everybody can relate to that because we all go through something that's shameful, even if it's like maybe you've been ill and you had to have someone look after you, but you feel a sense of shame that someone else has to look after you. Or you have shame about what someone has done to you in an abuse setting. Or you have shame about what you don't know you've done. Like I remember being accused of stealing something when I was like 6 or something. And I was adamant I haven't stolen it. And I felt awful because they pinned this shameful thing of stealing. I think it was a swimming costume. Why someone would do that, I don't know. Now I look back and I realise I might well have done it and been a different part that had gone and stolen the swimming costume. But I don't remember doing it. So I think I might still be innocent on that. But who knows? They get people to do some weird stuff, and stealing is one of them. I did actually also do um quite a considerable amount of stealing when I was about 7. That was unusual for a little kid. But I have since spoke to another friend at my school who also was asked to do sort of kind of little mini missions, a bit like tests. So you go and do these mini missions and you do them and you get like a rock. Maybe that's why we like stones, because you get the different levels of rocks. And I never understood some years towards the end of leaving school, I had a teacher give me all these rocks. Here's all these rocks that they just gave me out of the blue. And I thought, that's lovely. I like rocks. And now I'm like, did I earn all of them? Were those rocks the rocks that I had earned? And that was like, here you go. So the part that was trained was the part that would have had them rocks and done really well and achieved their missions, whatever. But anyway, I'm getting off track a bit. So, but in a way, I'm not, because reward is the polar opposite of shame. So the people we see doing bad things in the world at the minute, they all get titles and rewards and honourable this and honourable that. And like Jimmy Savile was suggested to the Pope to be a knight by a Knight of Malta, because yeah, they wouldn't have known about what he was doing, would they? And of course they would have, because they know about everything that's going on. That's the whole point of being arch controllers. And how sad that someone should get a title for doing those sort of things. Because it's not accidental that people have free reign and license to do them things. They're doing them because it works for them on another level. And you have all these children now set up who are perfect dissociative candidates because they've all been abused by the time they're 6. And then there's your standing army ready for programming. So on some level, it works like that. And then more recently, because I have really struggled with the shame of remembering things and then thinking, how the hell do I know that? Why would I know that? What was I used for if I didn't know? And I don't like to guess, so I try and keep the salient information a bit like you would when you'd write down the evidence in a police investigation. I try and keep to the facts that I do know for sure, which I call truth anchors, which has helped me a lot. So, because you are navigating through your subconscious that was turned into a minefield to manipulate you, so you're full of traumas and this, and to stop your brain hemisphere talking to each other.
Yeah, so another question that I had for you is, speaking of reconciling with having DID, having parts and figuring out these different memories and integrating them. Another thing that happens is the internal conflict of these parts are obviously pitted against each other in a lot of ways. They don't know about each other. Now all of a sudden they do, and there's lots of clashes and different things that can be very internally destabilizing. How did you manage that, and how have you been able to create that cohesion and some peace inside amidst all that chaos. I know that that can be a big struggle for people, so I'd love to hear how you navigated that.
Um, One, I've been really honest as far as I can be with people that I trust that are around me. So I have tried to be as honest as possible. And sometimes they've been hugely patient because it is a bit Groundhog Day with survivors. They do have the programming come out and it's a bit repetitive. There's like the I'm bad stuff, am I bad? Like I'm sure and people I know have had to deal with hearing that, regular. And it doesn't matter how much time you're reassured because that internal programming isn't undone, it's still there. So I have um at the minute I have the little part comes up and is like it's not working, is it? Because we've tried for a really long time and we had this idea the little part would just integrate and it happened. It's still there. Um and the same with a lot of the parts. But we have more awareness and more internal dialogue. So we didn't have any to start with. And now in a split second we have it. And I noticed that each part has a kind of download. So if we're chatting now like this, if I was going to switch to the next part and they would come in and they'd be like, Lou and Emma are talking about DID, right? So they'd have a kind of flash, quick update. This is where we're at, so that they could kind of seamlessly join them. Uh, that's why people don't notice some switches unnoticeable because they're trained to mask it, like to have the little parts I have were trained to mask being little so that people wouldn't notice, but people that knew you very quickly would notice. Um, because my eyes change, my face changes. I look like someone like a 5-year-old act at times. Um, and for me, like as an adult, I don't know. Can you imagine? So I'm working with special forces guys doing stuff, teaching them knots, like teaching mountain leaders knots and people, very professional people doing very professional stuff at different times. And they would not see a little part, right? They would not see it because um, these parts are kind of trained to surface in the normal world in social situations in an invisible way. So you wouldn't see someone change. It's a bit like being on a roundabout or a merry-go-round and the behind my front part, this other parts can just move through and you wouldn't know who was looking at unless you knew me personally and you'd see it in my eyes. But at times in my history, so this little 5 was out, but she couldn't do her shoelaces up properly. So there's me teaching knots and doing abseiling and climbing and everything. And just in the moment when it was okay, it was safe for the little to be there because she wasn't in charge of like a life or death situation in that particular moment. But she couldn't do her shoelaces up, so my shoelaces would fall undone, right? From this little not knowing how to do it. So those sort of things happen. I think it's quite common that actually for people with DID to have these little telltale things. Um, and I would get hoiked up. Somebody where it said that you smoking weed, and I wasn't. I just had that kind of dissociative gaze thing that happens. So you see, um, but for me personally, I'd been horrified at that time. Like I knew I had little parts, but I wasn't super aware why and what for and everything like that when I was doing that work. And people need to understand that you're not a liability. In fact, you're far less of a liability than most people because your survival instincts are really, really switched on compared to most people. You're aware of your situation, your surroundings, and the littles have survived. So even though they're little and might not be able to do a shoelace up, they have uncanny knowledge, and some littles have done a lot of training in stuff even before the age of 5. Like I knew other languages that I didn't know I knew, so there's that is easiest to train early on. And I couldn't understand some places that I went to. I could understand what this person's saying. Anyway, um, that's that, there's good things about it in the sense, like I said earlier, because they haven't got 40 years of all the other stuff. They're a bit lighter, so my little's a bit lighter, more relaxed. And they do, each part does carry the weight. So when I had gone off to Canada and Germany and done certain things, I would come back absolutely shattered. I don't always know fully what I'd been doing, but Canada for sure, even before I left Canada, I was exhausted and I didn't know what had hit me. And I ended up just sleeping on someone's sofa. And this is a real hallmark, at least for my life. I didn't have like wealth or anything. I was on someone's sofa in Canada, just trying to manage to keep one day to the next, uh, shatteringly tired from what I'd done. So the parts, when they are switched on for their purpose, are so focused and so on it, almost frighteningly so, that it saps all the other parts. So the other parts, and also I think those switched on parts aren't necessarily out for very long. So me and the little have been used to fielding everyday life, and and like we can join the dots of our life up fairly well. But these mission parts come out, do their job, go back in again, or come out, do their job, have their mind fucked. Excuse me, oh, can I swear? Have their mind messed with. You've gone mute again, Emma. Like with the LSD and stuff, like afterwards. Like someone literally pours it on me or puts a pill in my mouth or whatever like that. And one time I ate fat jack and it had it in it, and I thought it was just breakfast. But, yeah, I'm not, and so they don't care about the like disposability after you've done it. They don't care. Obviously, it doesn't have an effect on these focus parts. It's on this memory cohesion and where you've been, what you've done, kind of gets a lid put on it. But physically, I just remember being so shattered and not knowing why I was so shattered. And then I also had, I think, traumatic events kind of lodged in. So, and I don't know if they do that on purpose. So separately, I had a trafficking thing happen in Toronto. And actually, when I first came out to mental health in this country, and went and saw a psychiatrist and said I have dissociation, but I actually mentioned that when I was in Toronto. These friends of mine had basically like handed me on a plate to some other people I didn't know were going to be at this place we went to, and this doctor who was in Somerset, I think, in England, Somerset, said, "Oh," she said, "you're not the first person I've heard have that in Toronto." And I was just like, how often do people go into a clinic and saying they were like in from a city, from Toronto, some that she'd had someone in England have it there. So I don't know whether there's a kind of thing that we all get sent over there and it happens, but I wasn't expecting her to say that. So that was a trafficking thing, and I got out of that within about 3 weeks at the time. But I didn't know for a while. I just remember the reason I got out was because I was friends with one of them was my friend. I had formed a friendship with them, but the other guy was like not in it for friendship. And now I look back and was like, God, that timing of that is really weird because it's the same timing as this other stuff. And then I look at different other events in my life where those things have happened, and it's the same kind of timing. I've done something, didn't know why I was doing it, and then um, that sort of stuff happened. So I think they have a kind of standard thing that they do for people doing certain jobs that they don't want us to remember or recall everything, which is like traumatize us again or re-traumatize us again and drug us so that it's just mush for a bit. Um, and so it's not like, I mean, people that are just public, general population that doesn't know about any of this stuff and like watches TV and they watch movies and they see Jason Bourne and everything. And I think they have this kind of romantic idea about it. Oh, like you can do martial arts and stuff, but in these programs, they're giving us an idea that there are these operatives that are out protecting people from terrible things that will happen, not creating the terrible things to happen. You know?
Yes, you're absolutely right about that. And this is all, I mean, it's just so important. There's so many, the having a front and a back story is just so confusing in those moments to have these things that you think are your life and then to be confronted with an entirely different lifespan that's been the same amount of time that you've been alive, that has been a totally different storyline than what you knew about in your conscious life.
Yeah. And it's freaky, like it's the freakiest thing for me is meeting people that know me and they recognize me and I don't know who they are. Or meeting people that like shake my hand like and or assume to know things about me that I then I don't know. Like I was doing the hostile environment training and I had to ask how to hostile environment training is like scenarios based. So you're carrying a gun and pretending to take someone hostage, and then the hostages are learning how to not get kidnapped and things, or how to do first aid in a explosion, or these kind of extreme things. So it's like extreme situational based courses. So I was doing that, and I had to ask somebody who I thought I didn't know how to do something like load or hold a weapon, or how somebody would hold or load a particular weapon, and they were like, "Oh, I thought you knew all of that stuff." They had this, but probably they knew a part that did know some of this stuff. They had responded like they were shocked that I didn't, but it was because I was there with my front part, not the trained part that did know stuff like other things. Um, and I think that's really hard to grasp is that you have been taught things in these different parts. You have learned things that they say they need you to deliver a message. They've already taught you how to deliver a message, or say they need you to use a weapon. They've taught you how to use in some event or situation, and say they need your skills at sailing or what kind. They taught you how to do that, and with whatever excuse they need to make sure you have those skills. Um, if and that's if you're not in a military like job already. I wasn't in a military job. I just seem to find myself surrounded by them a lot for a long time. And more recently, I've met a couple of people. The last 10 years, I met the son of the head of MI5. I don't think you bump into these people normally, but anyway, he was the son of the ex-head of MI5 back in the end of World War II. And then more recently, the daughter of the old head of NASA. Like you just bump, like I'm in the middle of nowhere, try not to really talk about where I am, and yet I bump into these people quite regularly. And it makes me smile because it's just so outlandish. But if you're in that circle of the world of these people, it's not outlandish at all. And I think on some level, the parts that are loyal are sold whatever to convince them to be loyal. And for me, I think I still have problems with having parts. I think I'll always have problems with having these parts. One, because it's such an invasion into your psyche and your mind and yourself. Like, what would my life have been like if I hadn't had that I'd had to piece myself back together again repeatedly? Two, spiritually, like you're set up with shame, then the people that you had this done to you, that's very in like real life, and um where's your spiritual foundation? Like that whole foundation is shaken because it's been done to you by those people in those settings. So who's right? Who's the good God? Who's the so you can't trust these people, and your spiritual foundation's been built. And I haven't really talked about a lot of that stuff. But basically, I was used to seeing spirits when I was young, but I've also seen like half rotting animated corpses, and I've I've been traumatized in that regard. Like there's a lot of dead stuff, a lot of stuff about death in it all. Um, but then the spiritual side of it is very much the underworld, the world of the dead, channeling, necromancy, trying to find immortality and all that. The Masonic tradition tries to do that and learn magic and so on. And so I mean, that's the most scary thing. Is pretty much probably robbing a live person that's dead. That's like a demon spirit thing. So, and I think that's why I'm so scathing about it and irreverent, because I think a lot of people tiptoe around all this stuff out of fear, and I'm just totally irreverent about it. Like, how can that barbaric thing be allowed to continue for so long? How can kids be hurt by it? How can these people continue to walk around having hurt people and get titles and so on? And so I kind of, when I was thinking about coming out and speaking, I was really worried about my little parts coming out. Just, hi, I'm going to interrupt mid and be little. And um, I don't care, I think now. I don't care at this point because, so if I'm half baked, that's the evidence right there. If you see me switch, you see what they've done, you know? So you see the little part and you see what they've done. And then you can see it in people that it's not patently obvious in people's eyes. If you look for a traumatized child in newsreaders or politicians, you look in their eyes, you'll see a very traumatized child. So it's not like it's hidden. It's everybody's walking around there wearing this history, and they've
And
brought us to this craziness, haven't they?
yeah, and then I just wanted to say the opposite too. Sometimes somebody could look at, let's just say you, for example, they hear you here, you're very confident, you're very strong. We don't see a traumatized child unless you're really looking, but you're very well spoken, you're able to talk about this with strength. And so that's the other thing too. I think somebody looks at, say, like a politician or a celebrity, they see them in the part of them that is a speaker, somebody that is supposed to be in the public. They're trained to be speaking. They've had
Yeah,
acting lessons, for example, or public speaking lessons. And all of a sudden, people are coming out and saying, that person abused me, or this person is, they told me that they were abused as a child. And it's really easy to look at somebody on the other end too and say, there's no way that that person went through that.
yeah,
It's because society doesn't understand, dissociation in parts.
yeah.
And there's the traumatized parts, there's silent parts, there's all types of different parts, but there's also the parts that can be very confident and outward and charismatic and can speak really well and do not look like they could have gone through what they did.
Well, and that is the case inside as well. So there's me, confident. I can't be like that. I can't have a little 5-year-old who's traumatized. I have my own self disbelief and denial, and I had that was a huge part I had to I had to learn to accept that yes, you do have parts, yes, they do show up, and yes, they do like lose your credit card now and then. And things that are like every day just a little bit annoying, or put things somewhere safe and then we never find them, or have little stashes of food. I have like a food stash thing. I'm happy as long as I've got food stash. And I never supposedly went hungry. And yet I weighed 3.5 stone and have an eating issue in that I need food stash somewhere and used to carry it with me everywhere. So yeah, that doesn't happen without a cause. And um so the other thing is how many people that are like running the world like now don't know that they have parts. They don't know that they have it.
And I think it's a lot of people.
Yeah, it is. It's a huge amount. Like everybody in media, probably. And I think even within the bloodlines themselves, this has been passed on from one generation to another. Like maybe some of the priests have their they know about it. They know they've got everybody's files, etc. They know about everything. But they've probably also been through it, even though they come to know everything down the road. I don't know what they have to do to have that shame, but I mean, I think we come, I've come round full circle to the Bible because I realized it's not what people made it out to be. People like Christians were laughed at, and these people are not doing what it says to do in a Christian sense. And I have this history and this kind of jobs and this kind of life. And I was like, everything I've done in the Bible is wrong. Like all this stuff is kind of like the worst stuff to do. And on top of my already feeling ashamed, recognizing that so much of the spiritual stuff and the channeling my mum did and dead people and talking to dead people is wrong, right? Completely. And is why she's messed up now. It's why I was so ill and like horrified because it opens these demonic doorways. I literally had like demonic spirits. I saw them, I felt them. Um, and abusers very much channel them. Like that energy on a child is just unfathomable. Um, like the energy of lust or of desire is just it's not supposed to be parried by a child. Children are not supposed to have to deal with that ever. And I, when it was funny when I was reading that "Don't be ashamed," when people won't be ashamed. That I think so much of this has been weaponized against us, and of course the Bible's been in their hands for a long time, and it's a kind of weaponized as well. And I think, and there is truth in it, and there's truth that can dig us out of where we're at, because there's a huge peace offering in the Bible that says no matter what you've done, there's this way out. And if you've been programmed, or if you're involved in doing the worst stuff, and you actually have some feeling of remorse and want out, there is this way out of it, and people are so wrapped up in blackmail and compromise. We don't see that. We just see the news and people saying their thing, but behind the scenes, they've lost this family member and that family member's life on the line, and this is going on and that's going on. And what's weird to me is that we're all dealing with it, and everybody's compartmentalized, and survivors are speaking out. But even the people involved must be like beside themselves and worried because basically, like, the Bible doesn't have a good ending if you done shit stuff, excuse my language. It's like kind of shit. And to me, the lost sheep are very much people that have been through this stuff. And no matter what position they are in at the end of it, like, and I can't, I've struggled with that whole forgiveness thing of myself or other people because some of it is really something you can't necessarily forgive, like that you've witnessed. but also some of it is, like I say, the choice between two evils, and that isn't a choice. That there isn't a choice there. I don't think people realize that the higher up people get, the more there is a choice between this evil or that evil for people. So, but so there is a way out, and maybe you have to have been through everything you've been through, to not be frightened of death and not want to kill yourself and not be what you've already been to hell and back, like as a survivor. Some people do. Some people do bad things, and they haven't chosen to show up. Like if they were by themselves, they wouldn't choose to show up, and they would choose to do a good thing. But because someone else is there that could be hurt, they realize if they don't do one bad thing, that the other person will be hurt. So they have to do the bad thing. And they make children do bad things like that. And then when they grow up, they're in charge of doing that to other people and other children. And when as some people are survivors, they have been used to make sure other people do bad things, to make sure that they're bad, and then they have to do their job. So they have to go around and they have to see they've done something bad, and then they go back and say yes, that person has done something bad, and then they can say, well done, you have done it, and you can do this job after they've done it, because they are. If they don't do that bad thing, then that person will say, go back and say they didn't do that bad thing, and then they have a bad thing happen to them. And then sometimes the person who has to check is the one that has to do the bad thing to them because they haven't done what they were supposed to do. So it's hard because there are people that are really actually bad people, and they like to be bad.
Yes.
But sometimes they even have a little person, and that has had the bad stuff happen to them as well. But they were like when Big Lou was little, she had got no feelings, and when she had no feelings, then she might have done something bad if she didn't have no feelings left from what happened. But she learned how to feel again afterwards, and to feel like have empathy, feel what someone else feels, and then you won't hurt her. If you are like really brave, then you will hurt. You won't mind yourself hurt, but they know that you don't mind yourself being hurt, so they hurt other people that you love. And some people, they have like it's really easy, and they'll just do what they want because they say here's some money, or they'll do what they want because they give them everything. But some people, like, it's not about money, and then they use the other things.
Yeah, some people choose to do bad things, and other people are made to do bad things, and there's a big difference.
Yeah, and Beckley's angry at all of um the people like the grandmaster and people that have led people because they misled people and they misled my mum and they misled myself um and they misled the whole world so that we all fight and then they take everything and then and when you're little don't see someone and feel they lie to you and they tell the truth about everything. And you can't tell if someone's making a joke or lying. Um, and you can't tell sometimes what is real and what isn't real. Sorry, I've gone little. I can ask you some questions. I feel a bit confused sometimes because I'm here. I'm in a big body, but in myself, inside myself, I see myself little. And when I'm out, I always trip over stuff because my arms and legs are so long, and I can't lift my feet up. So and I do things like that, clumsy. Um,
What's your name?
Everybody calls me five, but I'm just Lou, same as Big Lou, but I'm five because I'm about five. But sometimes I'm littler, sometimes I'm bigger. Um, I was out and Piglet would get told off for speaking because I sound little and people would say, why are you speaking like that? And she would feel ashamed of it. But now I know that other people don't have littles um and when we say why are we here now, then other people say that because of what happened when we were little made us stuck or fight. And then I feel sad because I feel like something that's not supposed to exist. Um and so I can't always be outside because or with certain people because I'm not supposed to be little when you're big like an adult and then other times it's fun like I did driving. I drove a motorcycle and when you're five you can't really supposed to do that. And so you can come out and do stuff like that. But um, there's um, I wouldn't be here if I hadn't had bad stuff happen. And the other littles that I know about, they're all like in a chain together, and they have each one has a bad story. And every time Big Lou has to find something out, it has to go through me, and so I have to find out what the bad things were that happened to the other parts.
Mhm.
Um, and otherwise Big doesn't know about it. And I don't like it because as some of it is really hard. And so I don't like to I find out all the time from the other parts what happened. And I don't know why it has all to come through me, but it has always um I have a part next to me and if they have other parts before them, I have to go through them, and that's how it works. And my dog's worrying about me.
Oh,
What are they talking about here?
yeah, that has to
Oh,
be really hard for you.
other people with security.
Yeah.
Um, I have because I'm little, I tend to worry about things like food and water and shelter. I'm quite good at it. So because when you're little, you just worry about whether you have enough food and things. It's the kind of most important thing. And so, but I am helpful with this when people work too hard. I tell them you've got to stop and have a rest or eat something. I'm quite good at that. But so when other survivors, if they have this when they're little, they shouldn't be ashamed. Someone has made that. And it's like a brain damage. So they affected the brain, so it's stuck at 5 when some bad stuff happened. And then they affected the brain, so it's stuck at 2 or 3 or 4 or 9 or 10 or 20. And then they cut the brain in half like your mind, sorry, not your brain in half, so that they can get them to do what they want to do. My dog, yeah.
So cute. Anything you think would be important for other survivors to know, or people like me who aren't survivors who really want to learn about the life that you lived?
So when you're little, your brain it's really overwhelming. So, say someone speaks to me in the morning and I haven't got my speaking head on yet, I get grumpy because when it engages my speaking part of my head, and it kind of wakes me up and I felt relaxed and rested and quiet and when you wake up in the morning. And I think that they did stuff that affects you a bit in the mornings when you wake up. And then so people get upset, it's like grumpy because they just said hello or something in the morning. And I am grumpy because I'm having to think to say something. So people don't realize that it affects your brain in so many ways. And it's overwhelming sometimes when you're a little, but someone wants you to do some big stuff like the banks or ask a question about taxes or something. And um, when you're little, you're just thinking about food, going somewhere out somewhere else, and playing with animals and stuff. It doesn't make sense, and it forces you to be big and think, but it's hard and overwhelming. And also you get tired really fast when you're little. But the other thing about it is someone might see me and I sound like Bickley. I look like Bickley because they're not allowed to see that I'm little. And but I might be little, but you do all the adult stuff. And when we were little anyway, everybody knew all the adult stuff anyway, so it's not a big deal. So I know a lot of people like therapists or even some people think you have to talk like a very little child, but we have seen more than most people have ever seen in the world, and have also should not overlook or should listen to little children in real life that are still children because they have seen everything and they know more what's going on. And they just might not have the right words because I had to learn all the words with Becky to say what had happened, and I found out that it's not normal to know all the adult things when you're little. It's not a normal thing. And people aren't supposed to do that children and the idea is also relaxing for Becky. Sometimes if I come out, I haven't been out, so I am kind of not tired, and it means that we can do 10 times what other people can do. Sometimes Other times we can't do anything. So they're tired from it all. Um, and also, when you hold scary, horrifying things, normal life is really weird. Normal life and normal people kind of silly. You know that people have done those horrible things, and this goes on, and then people are talking about holidays. They're really silly because there's someone protecting people like that, and that's what's really bothering us. Not just that you know it's going on somewhere in the town or something, but that you know that the police have lost evidence and they have covered it up and they are protecting people. And my dog's just put his muddy paws on me and wants some dinner. It's funny. Um, that's protecting people. Yeah, so it's frustrating because you have all this knowledge about the world and the depth of knowledge about how it's really run, and others don't. And not only do you have that, and when you say it, it sounds crazy. Also, you don't say it. You don't talk about demons, and you don't talk about stuff that the Masons do, because they do it. So it's all right for them, and they get paid. Like, Jason Ball got paid and passports and money, and all of us didn't get nothing like that. And we just had to sort of go left stuck. And then um when you finally say about everything, you you are punished for being a good person. Like they hurt an animal or some loved one. And then we tried to find a way out, and I definitely read all the Bible and stuff. And she was like, "Oh no, I'm really bad." She said that, but I said, "No, that actually what the Bible said to me was we are like those lost sheep, and it's all about the people that have done bad things to children that are really bad. Like the whole Bible is about people that have done bad things to children." Like it's in there at the beginning where there's a bad, they give them to a bad god, and then it's in there in the middle when they say, look what the bad things that they've done, and they give their children up, and then at the end it says, "Suffer the little children to come to me," and so that's the shepherd that finds the lost sheep, and the reason we're lost is because we can't even remember certain parts, like. And when I first come out more and Bigley saw me at shop, I was shocked for me to see Bigley as well, but I kind of knew about her. Um, so I knew more about the parts than she did. I have another question.
I want to say how brave you are. You're so well spoken and you're so strong and you're so brave. And thank you for all the ways that you've protected Lou and all the littles and everybody around you and for your big heart.
I have one more thing to say as well. I like to find those foster siblings, but I haven't known how to find them. Johnny and Joni, because we never did find out what happened to them. And they had a hard life in the beginning as well. And then I would like to find that I like the files they have because I can't even access my medical records. They won't send them to me even though I send a letter. So, but I know that somewhere they have that file. And I think that everybody should have it because they probably have a file on them, the people that have my file. And the people that stole bits of our life have like, if our life was a book, have all these pages, and we have a book full with missing pages they've stolen out of it. And there are pages, not their pages. And I think if we're gonna solve things in the world, then we have to be brave enough to be vulnerable, brave enough to not worry about our lives and what happens to anyone, even our most loved one. In the Bible, it says, "Don't be attached to worldly stuff," because it's that. The worldly stuff includes everything you love, and every survivor has already had that blackmail done to them, if you like, when they're little, with a love of an animal they loved or some other person they loved. And if I come out now and say something, there were other littles when we were small that tried to talk about it to people. And it didn't work out, but I can speak about it, and a big grown up people can speak about it and can whistleblow, share the files, and then know that there's big spirits involved in all of this. And I have had them on me a lot. And I've had people do the same, but um, I, I think they, the bad people that do it, hurt themselves more than, because shame hurts more, and even if they have gone so far they don't feel anymore, that hurts more to not feel and feel. You can't help people and you can't be helped. And then when you learn that, you can't do anything. I want to say to us about when you're with people who have got the idea and you're a little, because there are like guys involved, they always want us little, so that's why they have sometimes why we have little parts for that. And then say when you're an adult and you're with someone you love and you're going to be intimate, you come out. This is the time you're supposed to come out. But when you're an adult, it's not. It's not the time you're supposed to come out at all. You're not supposed to be little with someone you love like that. And I haven't heard anybody talk about it online, but you feel, I don't know. I talk about stuff and then Biggie gets annoyed about it, so I've talked about it. But I don't mind. But anyway, yeah. I think it's important people understand that someone might switch to a little and they mustn't do anything because they have to learn about boundaries and things they didn't know about. We've talked for a long time.
Thank you for sharing all of that. And I'm so sorry for everything that you went through. I hope you know you never deserved it and you should have been protected and loved. And that so many people now love you and want to protect you and believe you and that your story matters and everything that you've done is so important and everything that Big Lou is doing with talking about it. You're helping other people and we're all really, really thankful.
Um, I want people to know that I had love when I was young. Even the people that have parts still can love with other parts. And my nan was lovely and my dad was lovely in a different way. um, other people, there are people that didn't have any love at all as well. So I think a lot of the worst bad people that did this didn't have someone just love them for being whatever they were.
You're right. It's very sad.
Everybody should be loved how they are because we were made and we were made like each one of us like the most amazing thing ever. As you know, when you go out and you look at a dog or a flower, and you're just like, wow, how is that made like that? And the whole world's taught us to think that it wasn't someone clever made it, but someone clever made it, and they made us. But also, the way we feel inside our middles about what's right and wrong and what's good and kind, and that person that made us like that because they're like that. And that I had to learn myself the right way around what God is and spirit and what's bad and what's good. And God doesn't lie. Go back on his word. And we do a lot. The whole Bible seems to be about us forgetting stuff. And I forgot a lot of stuff. And the hard part you always forget stuff because people will tell one part something and they won't tell the other part, and then you get told off for not having done something. It happens a lot. Or for having done something and you haven't even done whatever it was. And it's forgotten now.
You're very smart and very wise.
I want to see that video again. Do you want to speak to something?
Yeah.
And the dogs want their dinner.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, sorry, I myself back. It hit and miss sometimes. You hear my dogs, they're just real
Yeah.
coughing. Um, right, so you met Little. One of them still far. Yeah, so I didn't expect to cover all of that, but here we go. I think Little Five told you everything. They didn't leave much out, did they? Him and that.
She's so sweet.
Yeah, she's quite serious sometimes, isn't she?
Very
I don't
wise.
know.
Yes, you can tell she's had a lot of experiences and has heard a lot of really hard things. She's very, very smart.
I'm still catching up what she said. Oh, I know. I think I know one of the things she was talking about. Maybe we can talk about that next time because if we've been on for ages, I have lost track of time. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
enforcers, we'll just come back to that next time. That's what she was talking about. Enforcers, whether or not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to share with people how they can connect with you or reach you online?
Only on X at the minute, so I think you've already shared that.
I have.
Um,
I can put that in the show notes.
yeah, no problem. I don't really do direct messages where people comment and I'll pick it up. It's fine. If
Okay.
I get that, I put shadow banned on there. So the other way, I suppose, if people got hold of you, they could get hold of me because I get them. So my comments disappear and everything. There we go.
Absolutely. Yes. No, you're completely right. So I can connect your X below, and then we'll do a
Mhm.
part three and cover some more and answer questions if people have some. Um, Thank you so much for coming on and sharing and for being here with us today, Lou. You're such a beautiful, heroic, amazing person. And you're so incredibly courageous for speaking about your testimony and sharing all of this. And this conversation was so healing, talking about all these different topics that just aren't talked about enough. So thank you with all my heart for sharing with us, for coming on.
Just briefly, anyway. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. And so, for everybody listening, I will have Lou's X linked below. I'll have her former episode, the first episode that we did together. I definitely encourage you guys to listen to that before or after this one. That way, you guys can get some context, listen to her story. So I'm going to have that below so you guys can hear her first part of her testimony. I'll have all my links below as well. Connect with me wherever you can. I know sometimes these platforms can be very volatile with keeping this content up. So follow me wherever you can. I'll have all my links below too. Subscribe to my Substack, follow me across different video and audio platforms, and just keep up with me wherever you can. So you guys, we couldn't do this without you, and we appreciate you. Thank you so much for listening. God bless you all, and we will see you next time.